Hi, Romy.
Hi, teacher.
Sorry, give me a second. Hi, Romy.
Hi, teacher.
Hi, guys. Just give me 2 seconds. We're going to wait a few minutes for everyone to log in. Hi, Romy. Un segundo, voy a estar con lag. Ahora sí. Okay. Hi, guys. ¿Cuántos ya estamos? We're going to wait a little bit longer. 1 or 2 more minutes. In the meantime, can you guys turn on your cameras, please? Hi, guys. And I think that's mostly everyone. Okay, so we're gonna get started. So have you guys done listening practices yet?
Yes, we did one yesterday.
Okay. So you know how much time you have for each one. You know that the lectures, los que son más tipo lecture, you know, an academic lecture are going to be audios that are a bit longer, about 5 or 6 minutes long, and the shorter ones that are more informal and conversations are going to be a little bit shorter, like 2 or 3 minutes. In this case, we're going to listen to a lecture on film theory. So when you take the actual test, the TOEFL, you can only listen to the audio once. Luego te va a dar alguna parte en específico como que, ¿qué dice esta parte del audio? And you can play that piece, but you can't listen to the full audio more than once. So for this part of the test, I recommend having a piece of paper so you can take notes. So I'm gonna give you guys a minute to look for a piece of paper or anything you can write on. A veces en su compu igual pueden estar haciendo a notepad or something. Pero sí es bueno anotar ideas because you're not gonna be able to listen to it again. I'm also gonna get a little paper. Okay, everyone has their paper? Okay, ahora sí. This lecture is 5 minutes long and it's gonna be on film theory. So when they're more academic and more formal conversations or lectures in this case, there are gonna be, como ya hemos visto en los readings, there are gonna be some specific terms or new vocabulary that might be a bit difficult. So prestar atención a conceptos, ideas generales, no van a ir charlando y van a ir introduciendo casi como capítulos, ¿no? Cada idea y cada punto de conversación. So, como si fuera un titular de cada sección, listen to the main concepts. Okay, everyone ready? Me dicen si lo escuchan bien cuando empieza a reproducir también.
Listen to part of a lecture in a class on film theory.
Okay.
The early history of American film was tumultuous. There was a lot happening.
They're American.
But it was a couple decades later that the biggest change, the biggest revolution in directing and acting really came about in the 1950s. I'm talking about the development of method acting. So, what is method acting exactly? Anyone?
I guess it's about embodying characters with all your heart, like actually living through their experiences. You, the actor, I mean.
Okay, that's a good place to start. Yes, Ron, can you add to that?
Well, not really. It's just that I'm not sure I entirely get what's so different about method acting compared to classical acting. I mean, since the very first movies, directors always probably told their actors to try to identify with their characters and be authentic, right?
Okay, good. Good question. I'll clear that up in a moment, but first let's expand a bit on the meaning of method acting. Method actors were told to eliminate mannered, artificial elements from their performances. They were supposed to be their characters, in a sense, to get rid of the telltale signs of acting. On the other hand, classical acting technique really emphasized things like elocution, speaking with fluency and beauty. There was also a heavy emphasis on rehearsal. Actors were supposed to do a performance the same way every time so that the camera takes would be consistent between shoots. This might be a bit of an oversimplification, but classical acting stressed perfectionism. Method acting, meanwhile, undermined the idea that there was even an ideal to strive for in the first place. Actors were told to do what seemed natural to them. Some directors actually thought too much rehearsal ruined the truthfulness and spontaneity of performances. Okay, so let's bring this down to earth with an example. Why is A Streetcar Named Desire considered to be such an important film of American cinema from the perspective of method acting in the 1950s?
Marlon Brando's performance as Stanley was the first major mainstream example of method acting, right?
Well, that's close. The director, Elia Kazan, he worked with most of the cast on Broadway, and he used method acting techniques in that staged version. When he made the movie version, he tried to make all the actors use method acting. So it wasn't that Brando was first exactly. He just did it more famously than the others because he was so charismatic. But you can really see his approach in his performance. He did things like absent-mindedly picking lint off his shirt in some scenes, he picked the lint off of his wife's shirt. I mean, the character of his wife. The point is that Brando's character, Stanley, is essentially a brute, but Brando's spontaneous acting choices humanized him. His naturalism helped the audience to sympathize with him, and that performance paved the way for decades of performance in the future.
I have a question. I actually prefer Vivien Leigh's performance to Brando's in the movie. She played her role with such intensity. It seems so real. So why isn't Leigh's performance considered to be a groundbreaking example of method acting? Why does Brando get all the credit?
Actually, Leigh wasn't a method actress at all. She was classically trained, an opponent of method acting. She thought it was sloppy and unrehearsed. She constantly argued with the director of A Streetcar Named Desire and resisted a lot of his advice.
But her performance was so incredibly raw.
Well, her character was meant to be very melodramatic and theatrical. She had every word planned, was meant to be false and to manipulate the audience. From that perspective, a very rehearsed, dramatic, and articulate performance like Lee's seems totally authentic, even if it's actually heavily rehearsed. You could say that Lee's classical approach was just a close fit for the character she played. But it's great that you brought this up, because that makes an important point about the styles of acting. Method acting isn't by default better than the classical approach. In fact, many critics today call Lee's performance among the greatest acting triumphs of all time. Nonetheless, Brando's method acting was more influential in the long run.
Okay, so that's the end of the audio, and now we're going to go ahead with the questions. For these longer audios, for the lecture audios, we're going to have 6 questions. Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, first, the general idea of the whole thing. Yasmila, can you read the question and the options?
What is the main topic of the lecture? Defining characteristics of film created in the 1950s. Why method acting gained influence but failed to maintain it. Naturalistic and acting methods and a famous application of them. 2 types of acting and their respective advantage and disadvantages.
And which one do you think it is?
The last one?
Mm-hmm. Why?
Because in the class, they describe both types of actings and give an examples.
Yes, exactly. All throughout the conversation at the beginning, pregunta, what's the difference between classic and method? And then they give examples, and then they compare Marlon Brando's and Vivian Leigh's acting.
Yeah.
So, toda la conversación están comparando. So, yes. Naturalistic acting methods and a famous application of them is actually the answer. And I would also agree that it's the last one. Let's see why, though. Give me a second. There are 2 parts of the lecture. They mention method acting, and they give examples. I would say it's the last one, honestly, but the explanation is that method acting is naturalistic because it mimics the more natural habits of people in the real world. So the main idea seems to be like to describe how method acting works. Es el título que da el profesor, ¿no? Además, al principio del lecture. Pero sí los ejemplos parecen que estuviera hablando de esto. But it is the 3rd one. So that was a tricky one. Okay, here we go. Next question. Romina, can you read the question and options?
According to the professor, what most characterizes classical acting is comparison to method acting. Casting actors who are well suited for the roles that they will play, less careful attention to the precise words of the script, the internet to manipulate audience members' emotions, the pursuit of an ideal performance through rigorous rehearsal.
And which one is it?
Mm, the second, no, es así es.
What characterized classical acting? So we're looking for something that describes classical ones, right? Casting actors were well suited for the role. They mentioned que beneficia en esta película, en el caso de esta actriz, que su actuación clásica le ayudaba, pero no es lo que más, no menciona una característica de eso, ¿no? Less careful attention to precise words. Less attention, no, más bien eso era algo del otro método. It's the last one. Algo muy característico was perfection. He mentions perfection and he mentions rehearsal too. Rigorous, so bastante y muy persistente, rehearsal. And yes, the correct answer is the last one. Good job. Okay, the next question. Ruben, can you read the question and options, please?
Okay, why does the professor introduce a streetcar named Desire to emphasize how long it took for methods acting to be adopted by filmmakers, to suggest that it was the first film created by a director familiar with method acting, to provide a concrete example of change in film direction in the 1950s, to illustrate the merits of Marlon Brando's training as a classical actor.
And which one is it?
I think it's B.
Okay, option B, to suggest that it was the first film created with method acting. He kind of contradicts that idea though. En un punto menciona la película and then he says, but it's the first mainstream one. I think it's more to give a concrete example of how they changed, porque antes de esa idea, como que después de la idea, como que la contradice, pero antes de la idea, la introduce con, en los 50 se revolucionó la actuación en el cine. Entonces, esta idea lleva a esta idea. Yo creo que es un ejemplo de por qué cambia la dirección. And it is letter C. So moving on is Sergio. Can you read the question and options, please?
Okay. According to the professor, what effect did Brando's spontaneous acting choice have? They helped moviegoers to feel compassion toward an otherwise unlikable character. They established Brando's charisma, which was an important part of his later career. They complicated the relationship between Marlon Brando and his wife. They created difficulty for the director because they interfered with consistency between shoots.
And which one do you think it is?
I would choose the option B.
Okay, they established Brandon's charisma, which was an important part of his later career. What part of his character, o qué menciona el profesor que dice que ayudó a su carrera?
Because he talked about his charisma.
He mentioned his charisma, pero eso, cuando sí, en todas estas hay palabras que sí menciona. Entonces, it could be anyone, pero es esta toda la opción, ¿no? Luego no menciona su carrera. Entonces, I don't really think it's this one. Anyone think differently? What else could it be? Because they mentioned all these things. They mentioned his charisma. At some point, they mentioned his wife, but it wasn't his wife. It was the character's wife. They mentioned consistency too. Pero hay que ver cuál idea tiene partecitas erróneas y cuál idea es la que no tiene partecitas erróneas, la que está completa. Pero vamos eliminando. They created difficulty because it interfered with consistency. Sí menciona that classical acting helped with consistency, pero en ningún momento dice que el director de esta película de A Streetcar Named no sé qué con Marlon Brando tuvo dificultad con eso. No menciona eso. So this little part is wrong. They complicated the relationship between Marlon Brando and his wife. Habla de la esposa del personaje que estaba haciendo, not his actual wife. So this one is also wrong. They established Brando's charisma, que sí menciona, which is an important part of his later career, que no menciona. So this one is also, esta parte is wrong. They helped moviegoers feel compassion towards an otherwise unlikable character. Esto lo dice en otras palabras. When they ask, what does this mean? You kind of have to, lo que les dije, no buscar palabras hermanitas. Lo mismo. They said the character, el personaje que estaba haciendo Brando, was a brute. So si era un bruto, era unlikable. But what did Brandon do con su actuación? He humanized him. So he made him more natural. So ¿qué podemos entender de eso? Si es más humano, puede ser que they feel compassion towards an unlikable character, ¿no? Un personaje que tiene que ser alguien bruto, alguien desagradable. But su actuación lo humanizó. That's the correct answer. Who has not read yet? Fernanda, can you read the question and options?
What is the male student's attitude toward Vivian Leigh? It is clear by her intense performance that she was classically trained. Her heavily rehearsed dramatic acting style added authenticity to her role. Her powerfully emotional performance was preferable to that of Brando. She received less praise from Brando than her expertise should have garnered.
Mm-hmm. Garnered means like to recolectar. So, de la aclamación que debería haber recibido por su rol. Which one do you think it is?
B.
Her heavily rehearsed dramatic acting style added to the authenticity of her role. Todo esto igual se discute en toda la parte that they're talking about Vivian Leigh, right? But some points are made by the professor and some points are made by the students. What does the student say? Remember his tone overall when he's talking about Vivian Leigh. ¿Cuál era el tono de este estudiante, no? Que estaba, wow, es que Vivian Leigh era muy capa y su actuación sonaba muy emocionado. So, por esa pista de que sonaba muy emocionado, creo que podría, o sea, le está poniendo en alto. Also, it could be one of these two, I think. Porque esto es más como una observación que por lo que no tendría que darle ese, wow, esa emoción de su tono. Esto igual es como que una observación más objetiva a su trabajo, but he was very emotional about it. So I think he would go with either of these two. Her powerful emotional performance was preferable to that of Brando. It was preferable. Era mejor que la de Marlon Brando. ¿Dice eso en algún momento? He doesn't really compare. So he just says, wow. At some point, though, he does say, if she was so good, then why didn't she receive as much praise? Hace mucho énfasis en que she was really good at it, but she did not receive praise. Y ahí el profesor le da la contra de por qué y le explica. So I would say it's the last option. usually in these tests, like the options they give you, some parts are gonna be. It was this one. Sí la compara entonces sí dice que en algún punto era mejor su actuación que la de Brando. No, I lost that part, I missed it, pero sí, bueno, por eso es importante tomar apuntes. Pero sí era uno de estos. So next. I saw Claudia here, but I think you're driving, so I'm not gonna ask you to read because I don't want you to have an accident.
Yes, I'm driving. I'm sorry. I was just listening to class.
Yeah, don't worry, no worries.
Okay.
So Romina,
Thank you.
Romina, can you read the questions and options, please?
What can be inferred about Vivian Leigh's classical training? It is probably more appropriate for older, more stylized plays rather than gritty modern dramas, because it led to surprisingly authentic acting. Modern directors still train actors in the same technique. It contributes to performance that's celebrated by critics despite the influence of method acting. Leigh announced her training after numerous discussions with the director of a street cat named Desire.
And which one do you think it is? Remember that infer es que no lo dicen tal cual, sino you have to pick up the clues. Which one do you think? Let's go eliminando de abajo hacia arriba. So Leigh renounced her training after numerous discussions with a streetcar named Desire. Sí dice que she wasn't really happy with the director, but ahí lo dice tal cual, no? She had discussions with the director. So I don't think we can infer anything from that. So this one, I don't think so. It contributed to a performance that's celebrated by critics despite the influence of method acting. So here it's in the question, we're talking about her classical training. She doesn't use method acting in that movie. So it's not this one either, because the information is wrong. Because it led to surprisingly authentic acting, modern directors still train actors in the same technique. So yes, in this movie, it was surprisingly authentic, but this second half is wrong, porque explica que era para este personaje muy bueno su classical training, pero solo para este personaje, no casualmente se dio que funcionaba. And it doesn't say it at any point, but the way that it describes her acting, it's probably more appropriate for older, more stylized plays than for gritty modern dramas. In general, they give this idea about classical acting in general, the lecture. So I would say it's this one. Does anyone think differently or have a different opinion? Do you agree with this one? Yeah, we're gonna go with this one, and let's see. It contributed to a performance that's celebrated by critics despite the influence of method acting. So it was this one, because, yeah, sorry guys. So in the movie, Marlon Brando uses method acting, but she uses classical training. Still though, it contributed to a good performance in the movie. So that's why it's this one. And that was the last one. ¿Ya eran 6? Sí, creo que ya eran. Wait a second. No sé qué pasó con la página. Go back just a sec. See, that was a 6th question, so that would be the end of questions for this audio. No nos da el título de este. Ok, bueno, por eso eran las 6 preguntas del anterior listening. Now we're going to move on to another one. Pero antes de seguir, do you guys have any questions about any of the questions we saw? About the listening in general? No? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and listen to this one. And we're going to go ahead and answer the questions. It's also it's also like an academic lecture. So lo mismo, con sus papelitos listos para anotar. And we're going to go ahead and listen.
Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
As you all know, psychological trauma has lasting and very damaging effects on a person. People who have survived abuse or neglect from a very young age, soldiers coming back from a war, and other kinds of people too are at risk for the disabling symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, for years and years. Some types of therapy can provide some relief and some symptom resolution. These therapies can be long-term or short-term. They can teach people many useful skills. They can focus on past, present, and future and be very helpful. However, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, has the promise to do something unique. It can help on a somatic level, which means that it helps the body feel different, and not just the mind, like other therapies. EMDR allows the body to feel safe again and to learn that a new life is possible. It is the set of standardized protocols that incorporates elements from many different treatment approaches, and it has helped millions of people of all ages find relief from many types of psychological stress. It involves learning new ways to process traumatic memories and a somewhat unconventional approach in which patients follow a beam of light back and forth with their eyes as they work with their therapists. The big goal of EDMR therapy is to understand completely the experiences that are causing problems and to include new ones that are needed for full health. To process these experiences does not mean just to describe them and talk about them. Instead, it means setting up a state of mind that will allow these experiences to be understood in a healthy way. In other words, the big, strong emotional reaction will become much smaller over time. The person will feel better and not have as much difficulty doing day-to-day activities. The inappropriate emotions, beliefs, and body sensations will be removed. Negative emotions, feelings, and behaviors are generally caused by unresolved earlier experiences that are pushing you in the wrong directions. The goal of EMDR therapy is to leave the patient with the emotions, understanding, and perspectives that will lead to healthy and useful behaviors and interactions. No one knows exactly how any form of psychotherapy works in the brain. However, we do know that when a person is very upset, their brain cannot process information normally and clearly. The traumatic experience can become frozen in time and continue to repeat endlessly. Remembering a trauma may feel as bad as experiencing it again and again. The images, sounds, smells, and feelings often do not change but remain very present. Such memories have a lasting negative effect that interferes with the way a person sees the world and the way they relate to other people. EMDR seems to have a direct effect on the way that the brain processes information. Normal information processing is resumed, so following a successful EMDR session, a person no longer experiences the images, sounds, and feelings when the event is brought to mind. The patient will still remember what happened, but in a much less upsetting way. Researchers think that this has to do with the way the person's eyes move when he is thinking of a bad memory. In EMDR, the patient sits in a chair and is taught to think about a memory that is very painful. Then, with the guidance of the therapist, the patient thinks about this memory while following a light moving from side to side with his eyes. This causes his eyes to move from one side of his head to the other. The movement of the eyes stimulates the brain in a way that helps the person feel better. Although EMDR may produce results more quickly than previous forms of therapy, speed is not the issue. And it is important to remember that every client has different needs. For instance, one client may take weeks to feel safe enough with a therapist to be able to do the work that is required by the treatment. Another reason why EMDR may not be very fast in the eyes of many psychologists, why it sometimes has that reputation, is that some patients have layers of long-term trauma, so that when one issue is resolved, another one comes up. Sometimes the next issue may even be more important. Also, treatment is not complete until EMDR therapy has focused on the past memories that are contributing to the problem, the present situations that are disturbing the patient, and what skills the client may need for the future. All three elements need to be addressed: past, present, and future. The good news is that this treatment works and people really do get better. A lot better.
Okay, so Carlos, no vi que no entraste, pero te vi acá. Did you manage to listen to everything? Are you there? Carlos?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, ¿lograste escuchar todo?
Yep.
Okay, so
I could
what is
listen.
the main topic of the lecture?
She talked about EMDR, but I could hear different types of therapies.
Mm-hmm. So you think it's option 2?
I think it's option 2.
Okay, what she really does is describe how it's applied and, different ways that it works. But the whole time she's still talking about EMDR. When she talks about
Okay.
long-term trauma, cómo afecta a pacientes con long-term trauma, it's EMDR. When she talks about, I don't know, it's all on EMDR. So I don't think it's that one. Directamente podemos
Okay.
eliminar estas dos, porque no menciona varios tipos, sino que insiste sobre el EMDR. ¿Cuál crees entonces que
Okay.
sería?
The last one, I think.
Okay, why not the first one?
It could be 2, but I couldn't understand all the words, so I'm basing my answer in what I could understand. So
Did you have more trouble with like technical words or the conversation, or was she maybe talking too fast?
I think too fast and a technical words too.
Yeah, she was going a little too fast. Luckily with technical words, muchas veces las palabras técnicas, como tratan de ciencia y cosas muy generales en todo el mundo, they're similar in languages. So in this case, yeah, she was talking a little fast though. Pero al principio sí nos da la definición, pero extiende mucho sobre eso, ¿no? No habla solo la definición, va mucho más allá. So I would think, yes, it's the last option, like you said, because she talks about the value and usefulness of EMDR treatments. And she really goes. And yes, you're right. It is the last option. So we're going on to the next one. It's weird, you guys. It should be Hmm. Wow, I don't know what happened, pero se salió del ejemplo que hemos visto. Give me 2 seconds, let me try to fix it. And ahorita les vuelvo a compartir pantalla. Just give me a second.
The mic.
Okay, ahora sí. I don't know what happened, guys, but the audio and the questions we were looking at, I can't find them. Usually we're gonna try to do 2 listenings and their questions per class, pero hoy día no sé qué les ha pasado, que han desaparecido y no los logro encontrar. So for today, we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna end a bit early. But for the next class, we are gonna see and complete two listenings and their questions. So we're gonna leave it there for today. Do you guys have any questions or comments about the class, about any of the questions, about the types of questions that there are? For the listening part of the exam?
These kind of questions are going to be in this way. I mean, only listening and then a group of questions after listening.
They give you the listening. You have to listen. You can only listen to it once, and then they give you your 6 questions, que usualmente son de este tipo, ¿no? Que piden que you can infer something, or that you reinterpret something someone said, or maybe find the context for a certain word. Hay otra donde te van a poner un pedacito del audio y tienes que decir qué significa esa parte. But yeah, those are usually the types of questions que se repiten en los exámenes. I don't know if that answers your question or.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay, so I'm gonna send you guys the poll. And give me 2 seconds. Ahí les mando la encuestita. Okay, so you can fill in the poll, and una vez llenada la encuestita, pueden salir de la clase. So, mientras la llenan, me iré despidiendo. It was nice seeing you guys today. I hope you had a nice class, and I'll see you guys all again on Friday.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, teacher.
Teacher.
Have a good night.
Bye. Ay, no, pues, una foto más.